Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Welcome to Magic in the Room. My name is Ben West.
And I'm Luke Freeman. And today we are continuing our series, What Should I Do Now? And really this whole series is about, okay, things are fast-paced. Some people are struggling to fill shifts, keep the doors open. Some people are struggling to manage their own engagement levels with work. Some people are, they've already cast their die a little bit and said, hey, I'm going to exit maybe employment traditionally, and I'm going to try something different. And what should I do now? Like, that's the theme, is that the world is different. We've had the Great Resignation, Great Reshuffle, great something, or maybe not so great, depends on your perspective.
Yep.
But what should I do now? And today what we want to talk about is, as a leader, what should I do now? And the answer, I'm going to give the short answer, is reflect. And I just want to say, I realize that's not what people want to hear, because anything that takes time and takes that cognitive, emotional effort, there is a gut reaction to right now. We hear it from our clients. We hear it from, let's say we're trying to help a leadership team execute on a particular KPI that they're working on, right? They don't want to. They're like, I've tried so hard for so long, and now you're telling me to improve even more?
Right.
Like, there's a gut reaction from a lot of folks. But I think we don't want to sugarcoat it. And we also want to say that this episode might not be for everyone. So if someone is in a place where they are emotionally overloaded and you're just like surviving and making it through each day, that's okay. So like, maybe you can't reflect this week. I would still encourage you to listen, because when you get a chance, when you get through kind of the crucible moment that you're in, pausing and reflecting is hugely critical. And I'll say I've had a crazy couple weeks leading up to today and being in the studio. It's kind of crazy today. Ben and I are here together. Super excited to be hanging out with you, Ben, in the studio. And we have two teammates stuck, at hub airports because they can't get into Tulsa because it's very icy here today.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot going on organizationally for us right now. And I resonate with this idea that like there's too much to reflect. And it's also true that yesterday I went and spent an hour with my coach and talked through how do I continue to develop. And I reflected and I left there with some value. Not everyone has the luxury to do that. It was a sacrifice for me. And I think I just want to go into this eyes wide open that what we're going to be talking about is going to feel like a sacrifice of time to really think through, how am I showing up as a leader?
Yeah.
Because when we're talking about reflecting, that's really what we're showing up at, or that's what we're talking about, is reflect on how I want to show up as a leader. What is the story that I'm creating and writing right now about leadership? My leadership story, my leadership journey that's being written. And the more we get clear on what we want that story to be, the more intentional we can be about what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just thinking about this idea of reflection and how you want to show up. I know for me, like, this is one of those recurring habits that I try to build of being like really good at reflection. And so I don't know, I think it's something that we have to talk about. I say this about a lot of things, but without guilt, if you are in this place, like for me, like I'll just say personally, like I have had it on my list for every day for the last several weeks, like spend some time in intentional reflection about some things that I want to process.
Yeah.
But I keep not doing it. And so I think if we're not careful, we get into this cycle of guilt, like, oh, I'm not doing that. I should be, and we're just guilty about it, instead of just saying, no, it's okay. Now go do it,
Yeah.
And so, because that is where growth comes from. Like the learning is in the reflection. I believe that completely. And yet, even for me, I let things get in the way. So yeah, as we go through this, I hope that people don't hear any guilt in this, but it's as something that we hope people will take on and do.
Yeah. And so the tool that we're going to use to walk through and reflect about our own leadership presence is called the Leadership Challenge. If you go back to episode 32, we did a whole episode just introducing the Leadership Challenge with Dr. Bob, who's frequent guest. So go back and listen to that if you're interested, but I'm going to give like the 30-second overview. So the Leadership Challenge is a book, and it outlines 5 practices of effective leaders. It really came out of research by James Kouzes, Barry Posner, back in the 80s. And they started asking this question, your 2 questions. What do you do as a leader when you're performing at your personal best? And as a follower, what do you look for and admire in a leader? They compiled all of those answers, did a lot of statistical analysis over the however many decades from then until now. They've added millions of data points to their research, and these 5 leadership practices have emerged. And we'll get to those 5 practices, but really the key findings is that leadership can be learned. So a lot of us kind of grow up being like, oh, that guy's a natural leader, or we equate charisma with leadership, or we equate, ability to get stuff done with leadership, or ability to write or talk in an organized way with leadership. They say no, according to their research, it can be learned, and anyone can be an effective leader with practice. And so today we're going to walk through those 5 practices as a reflection tool, and we're just going to say, what should I do now as a leader in the crazy circumstances that we still find ourselves in every day? And Ben and I are going to share a few stories of our own leadership journeys. We're going to talk about some things that we've observed and talk through with clients, people who are doing this right, and who are struggling. And I think the key point here is that I would ask everyone to think about the turbulence and the unpredictableness of the environment that we're in over the last 2 years and will continue as ripe with opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
People are getting leadership opportunity. And I don't mean career opportunity necessarily. I mean, some people are, sure. There's a great job market right now. But I really mean leadership defining moments opportunity at a rate that I don't think was present before, when there wasn't as much disruption, not as much change. And so, old world, you might get a few, 3, 5 defining leadership moments in your career, like something that's a huge challenge, a huge unexpected thing. And you have the opportunity to rise to it and navigate that thing with your team, build a team through it, forge something that is meaningful and matters out of this opportunity. And now, monthly,
right?
I don't know if it's monthly, but it's a lot more. And so, this environment that we're in, we're going to look at it in this episode through the lens of opportunity, looking at these 5 leadership practices and say, if I was going to be someone who took these opportunities by the horns and forged ahead in my leadership journey, how would I do that? What should I do now?
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. As you were saying, talking through that, I was just thinking, I heard this kind of saying recently, and I don't necessarily believe that it's true, but basically the saying was like, you're not a real business until you've almost failed, until you get to kind of go through that crucible and find out what's real. Like, you're not a real business, or you won't be successful, or something like that. But yeah, like everybody has gotten to go through that like 10 times in the last 2 years. And it's just, everybody has, it's reality.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportune time for us to reflect on, okay, how do I want to show up when that happens again? Because it's going to be like in 2 weeks, whatever. So yeah, you got to do it.
Everyone's at home being like, oh my gosh,
Right.
Don't say that.
Exactly.
Don't put that on me.
Sorry.
Okay, well, the first one is model the way. This is the first leadership practice. And just give a quick rundown here. So modeling the way really is composed of a couple different things. One is that when we model the way, we clarify values by finding our voice and affirming shared ideals. So we clarify values for the team that we're on, for the people that we lead. We do it by finding our voice and by affirming that we all want some same things. The other thing that modeling the way is, it's setting the example by aligning our actions with those values that we've clarified.
Mm-hmm.
And so modeling the way is modeling the way. It's being clear about how we do things here, what our definition is of doing the right thing on this team and this organization, and then not deviating from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Kouzes and Posner have 6 behaviors that they mention as behaviors that show up with leaders who model the way well. And I'm just going to run through them. And then, Ben, I'm curious which of them really stands out to you.
Yep.
So behavior number 1, they set a personal example of what is expected. Behavior number 2, they make certain that people adhere to agreed on standards. Number 3, they follow through on promises and commitments. Number 4, they seek feedback regarding their effect on others' performance. Number 5, they build consensus around the organization's values. And number 6, they clarify their personal leadership philosophy. So when you think about those behaviors of modeling the way, what stands out to you?
Yeah, as I kind of read through this list, and I think about it through the lens of, the massive change of the last couple of years, like a lot of them kind of stand out as being really important, which I think we'll probably end up saying that on every single one of these, like they all stand out. But, when we talk about adhering to agreed on standards, like it's so easy to like change your standards. We have a lot of people saying, I'm just filling with warm bodies, these types of things. Like those conversations come up a lot. I think the one that stands out to me, though, is this one about seeking feedback regarding your effect on others' performance. And I think the reason is because when things are crazy, when there's a lot of change, I think it's just really easy for us to like come back into our assumptions of what other people need, feel, how I'm affecting them. Like we just default to our assumptions, especially when things are hard. And I'm just thinking about, I've had lots of conversations with different clients recently about just trying to seek feedback from their team and people saying, no, everything's great, or not really being willing to be honest, or whatever it is. And I think some of that, like that's always kind of true, but I think some of it probably is just people are just saying, I'm like just trying to make it. I don't want to give this feedback and be vulnerable. And so when I think about that from a leader's perspective, like you just have to work harder at it, like building that trust, finding those ways to have that one-on-one in a safe place and do it consistently every week so that people don't think that they're in trouble, all of these things to really get that good feedback on, how what you're doing is affecting them. And if you're really actually showing up how you want to show up, because we just assume that we are, but are we? Are we really? We have to go find that out.
Yeah. And this goes back to that idea of the world that we're living in right now being an opportunity, because I think leaders have frequent opportunity right now to ask for specific feedback. Hey, this last crisis that we just went through, how did I show up?
Yep.
What did you need from me that I didn't give? What was something helpful in maybe my approach as the leader of our team during that transition, that time, that challenge we faced? What did I do that wasn't helpful, that made your job harder? So I think really getting to that level of specificity is important, but man, just lots of opportunity to do that right now. And again, not only do we get those defining leadership moments more often, even getting feedback on specific crisis management or transition management or business model change management or whatever, like we should be able as the leaders who reflect a lot and ask for feedback a lot right now in the time in history that we're in should be able to evolve and develop faster than people who came before them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real opportunity.
Yeah. What about for you? Which one stood out?
Yeah. So for me, this last one clarifies a personal leadership philosophy. And for me, immediately when I read that, the thing that jumped in my head was, I mentioned earlier, I spent some time yesterday with a coach that I'm working with, and might feel a little like woo-woo, soft, mushy to people, but one of the projects that they had me work on was like doing a self-portrait. And I've done that before. Lots of people, as they're working through lots of things, end up, all right, who do I want to be? What do I want to be? What's my perception of myself? And I will say what came out onto the canvas that I was working on was so clear to me in a way that it had never been before. Like when I think about the value that I offer to people, the journey that I've had the last, 5-10 years, longer, right? It's a long journey.
Right.
But I had a much easier time answering that question than I ever have previously in my life. And that should be the case, right? As we mature, it should get easier for us to say, who am I? What value do I offer? But for me to have real words and images around how do I show up as a leader? What is my leadership philosophy? What's the highest good I can provide to a team that I'm leading? Was really encouraging to me. And so I share that story not to say anything great about me. I'm definitely have as many flaws as I have strengths, but this idea that when we do the work and are clear about what we have to offer, one, it makes it easier to know when we have something to offer and when we need to leverage the strength of someone else. It also, and Ben and I have talked about this. I can say with words how I lead and what you can expect of me. And Ben can do the same for me. Like, hey, here's how I show up as a leader. Here's my style. Here's what I'm trying to get at when we're having a conversation. And that's hugely powerful in a team setting, because people get to opt in. When you explicitly say, this is what I'm all about, this is my leadership philosophy, people can say, okay, not the team for me, or great, I appreciate that. Let me ask you some questions. So, that was the one for me.
So do you, like that portrait that you drew, how much of that clarity was kind of forged in the difficulties of the last 2 years, and how much of it is just because we're getting older?
That's a good question. I think the challenges of the last couple years, as someone who has a spouse, has kids, navigating school, as a business owner with Purpose and Performance Group, as a consultant, helping people through challenging things, I got a choice pretty early on. Like, am I going to cruise and phone it in, or am I going to take challenges as opportunities? And again, this sounds like I think I've done it all perfectly, which is 100% not the case. But I think if I had not woken up most days trying to rise to the challenges that came across my path, I don't think I would have been as clear as I am today. Yeah. So I think, I've been on the journey for a while, right? Do leadership development as my job.
Right.
So, and have for a couple decades. So sure, I've been on the journey, but there's something about the level of clarity that I feel like I can tap into now. I think it's correlated to just the number of challenges and changes and kind of getting to live a lot of challenges vicariously through clients as well, has been really helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you did that, you were intentional and you reflected on them as you went, and you kind of built that knowledge over time. It wasn't like at the end of the 2 years, all of a sudden it was all there, but you were intentional to build it up as you went.
Yeah, maybe. That makes it sound like every week I was like, what did I learn this week? Which isn't the case, because I can remember several times where I'm like, man, I have not pulled out my personal purpose in 4-6 months. Yeah. I've just been surviving. So in the moment, it feels like I'm doing all I can do to just keep pressing forward. But, it goes back to kind of the disclaimer at the beginning of this episode, being committed to listening to that voice and trusting it, kind of like you were saying about you've had on your list for a couple weeks now, like I need to reflect on some things that have been going on. Well, I 100% have faith that because I know you're not going to just shut that voice out.
Right.
It's going to keep nagging at you until you make the time to reflect. And I think that's the call that I think I want people to hear.
Yeah.
Is like, listen to what you know to be true about development and leadership. Listen to that voice and make time for it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can share the next one.
Great.
All right. So the next practice is inspire a shared vision. And this is really about, imagining the future, imagining an exciting future, and then enlisting others into that vision. So being able to communicate it to them in a way that's compelling, that they can understand, and then they can buy into or not. I mean, that's kind of the negative of this, but I think that there's something about sharing a vision and people deciding that's not for me. I think that that's part of this as well. So I'll just read through the behaviors. I'll just kind of read through them, and then you can reflect on which one stands out to you. So the behaviors talks about future trends influencing our work, describes a compelling image of the future, appeals to others to share the dream of the future, shows others how their interests can be realized, paints big picture of group aspirations, speaks with convictions about the meaning of work. So what stands out to you?
Yeah. So first of all, I think this one is a challenge right now. So, I mean, we're doing this in the context of what should I do now in the midst of labor shortage, supply, all the things.
Yeah.
And so when we say, well, inspire shared vision, and it's identify those future trends and describe that compelling image, I think people have a fair point when they're like, I don't know. I have no idea what this is gonna look like a year from now. And so the thing that has stood out to me that I've seen several times over the last few months, particularly since these trends in job numbers and turnover and people opting out of traditional work. Actually, Chris on our team, Chris Province, I've heard him say this to several clients, and I've seen it click with leaders who maybe were on the edge of kind of flaming out and being like, okay, this is too hard. I can't do this anymore. His message has been, if you think you're going to go somewhere else and there's going to be different problems than what you're facing right now, like, that's probably not the case. You can probably go find another role. You can probably take a month off and find another role pretty easily, the way the job market is. Unlikely, though, that you're going to find one that's safe, everything's known, all of those things. Now, don't hear this as if you're being abused at work, that you shouldn't leave, right? We would never advocate for that. Like, go find yourself a good leader. This is a great time to do it. But if you're someone who is feeling that temptation for just change, this is too hard, it's 2 years, like I can't handle it anymore, like, know that the same problems are going to be wherever you go. Like, some people are calling this a great reshuffle. It's like a lot of people feeling the same things that are just trading jobs, essentially going out and getting each other's jobs.
Yeah.
So what Chris has said that I think is effective, that doesn't claim to know the future, but also inspires a shared vision, is there are places right now where leaders are saying, yes, this is hard. Yes, there's uncertainty. Let's create something really cool. Like, let's stick through it. Let's band together. Let's be a true community, and let's see what we can make happen. And we've talked about this before, this idea that right now, if you're an emerging leader that has an idea, go do it.
Yeah.
Like, the person that's been in the industry for 30 or 40 years, like, the industry's different now. There's no reason for them not to listen to your idea. And so there's a lot of opportunity in creativity, in experimentation, in developing different cultures, different cadences, different structures, different strategies. Like, all of that can happen where you are now, if the leader inspires that vision. So I think if I'm answering what should I do now with this inspire shared vision, like, to the leaders out there, create a vision of, I need everyone on my team to help me figure out what we are becoming. Because we're not being anything super structured. We're just like pivoting.
Yep.
So help me make sure that we pivot into something that you are incredibly excited about. I think that opportunity exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, for me, this is one that I'm just kind of reflecting on. And so I'm curious to see when I get done saying this, if you say you're wrong or if you say you're right. So what I'm wondering is if the time horizon for the compelling vision changes. So like right now, when people are I can't cover shifts, like it's really hard to imagine 5 years in the future, we're going to be this thing.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm intuiting that it's good though to say, let's not think about that. Like somebody has to be thinking about it. I'm not saying to ignore it, but that also we have to kind of focus on, okay, like what's the things that we can start doing now that's going to solve our shift covering problem in the next 5 months? And let's have a compelling vision for that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's project management. It's making small wins, it's breaking down a big vision into something smaller that people can grab onto, which I think if you were inspiring a shared vision, you should have been doing all those things anyway.
Yeah.
But maybe it becomes more important now just because people have a hard time imagining past how am I going to cover tomorrow?
Yeah. The thing that jumps into my mind when you say that is this, certainty is one of the neurological needs that human beings have. Like we crave physiologically, like our brains crave certainty about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so when I hear you say, well, maybe inspiring a shared vision is like getting a clear vision about what next week is going to look like,
right?
That still meets that neurological need.
Yeah.
And so I think it's completely valid. I think you can maybe blend a couple of these things that we're talking about too. Like, hey, we're creating something here. We don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years. What kinds of things do we want it to look like? We want it to look like people have meaningful employment, like we have meaningful relationships at work, like people are growing and developing here and supported by the organization to do that, like we all are getting paid enough to support our families. Everyone agrees with that, right? And people say, yes, okay, exactly how we're going to tick all those boxes, we don't know yet.
Yep.
But it feels like the right step towards figuring it out is next week we're going to do X, Y, Z. How does everybody feel about that? Yeah. And I think just telling that story, and you're going to have to tell it like every week or every day, but telling that story over and over around, here's where we're going, here's the kind of place that we want to be, and next week here's the plan, that maybe gets us there. Like that's a habit that I think you should do now to answer the question, what should I do now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. So the next one is challenging the process. So this is leadership challenge, leadership practice. Number 3 is challenge the process. And challenging the process is made up of a couple things. One is we search for opportunities by seizing the initiative and looking outward for innovative ways to improve. And we experiment and take risks by constantly generating small wins and learning from experience. So it's this idea that we challenge the process by looking outward and learning. We challenge the process by reflecting inward as well, and being in a place that we're willing to take risk. We're willing to make little experiments, make small bets inside our organization. So Kouzes and Posner outline 6 behaviors associated with challenging the process. Number 1, leaders who challenge the process seek challenging opportunities to test and build skills. Number 2, they challenge people to try new approaches. Number 3, they search outside the organization for innovative ways to improve. Number 4, they ask, what can we learn? Number 5, they make certain that goals, plans, and milestones are set so there's clarity about where you're going. And then the last one, number 6, they experiment and take risks. So as you thought through those different behaviors for challenging the process, what stood out to you?
This one is interesting to me because it's something that like I do pretty naturally internally, but I have a hard time like doing it in the group, I'm kind of like sitting back like have it in here, but then the courage to put it out. And so there's kind of two thoughts that I have on this, and they're not exactly tied to these behaviors, but I think that they're still worth saying. So one is just that I think right now is the best time to challenge the process.
Yeah.
Because like whatever the challenges that you're facing, your systems were built for something else.
Yeah.
And so like you have to be challenging the process now. Otherwise, you're just going to end up keep trying to cram your current resources into an old process that was built for something completely different. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
So now is like the best time to do it. Flip side though is I would say that now like it takes the most courage to do it.
Yeah.
Because of that certainty thing that we were just talking about. Like people want certainty. They want to know what tomorrow's is going to be. And if you come in and you're like, all right, challenge the process. This thing's not working. We're going to do it completely different starting tomorrow. Like people are going to react against that. And so I think those two things play against each other. Mm-hmm. So all that said, I think that's why this one like has to be paired with the other ones. Yeah. If all you're doing is challenging the process, then you're just kind of the mean guy criticizing people. Yeah. Is how people feel. Like that's not what you're really doing, but that's how people are going to feel. But if you're pairing it with inspire a shared vision of what this can be once we work through this process, with enabling people to act within this new process, like all of those things, then it can be successful. But you can't just challenge the process and like drop your bomb and walk away.
Right. Right. This isn't what I had kind of thought about ahead of time, but what that sparked for me, and this is a Greg Robinson-ism. So we had a great conversation with Greg about leadership on a previous episode. But one thing he talks about as he learned to influence other people, one of the most powerful tools that he learned was to ask challenging questions of himself in the presence of others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we can apply that here by saying, a technique to challenge the process in a place where the way we always do things is held in some regard is to say, at first I thought that when we did XYZ, we were getting the best result possible. And then I started wondering, what if instead of XYZ, we did XYJ?
Right.
Make up letters.
Right.
And when I started thinking about it, I wondered if maybe I had missed an opportunity all along, and I'm just not sure. What do you guys think? Like, am I questioning myself too much or not? Mm-hmm. And, by using that technique, all of a sudden people can look at you as the leader, as the person who's vulnerable, which vulnerability is an amazing skill, right, to use in leadership. And it almost automatically opens the door to saying, well, no, I thought that too. And what else did we think was true that maybe isn't true? And so just a little bit of technique in there.
Yeah, it gives them permission to challenge the process.
Yeah. It goes back to model the way too. But we're on challenging the process here.
Well, I think like that's an important point about all of these, though, is that they do work together. I mean, it is the 5 practices of leadership. And if you just do one, it's not that you're going to be unsuccessful, but they all have to pair together.
Yeah. For me, the behavior that stood out for challenging the process was searching outside the organization for innovative ways to improve. Recently did some work with a leader who they're in kind of a manufacturing environment and have some pretty good processes. They're very intentional about what they ship out, that it meets certain specifications. And I thought he was really courageous in challenging the process because he had stumbled across a technology product that would essentially replace, do the work of 3 or 4 people. And the organization was not ripe to change. It wasn't ripe for the process to be challenged. It wasn't ripe to make an investment in this technology solution. But he was so passionate about it and so had such a vision around how it can improve outcomes that with just a little bit of work and honing of the message, we were able to get a win and move forward. And really, I think they're already seeing fruit from that change. And so I was really inspired by his vision and his excitement and passion to take best practice. And then what that sparks for me is this idea of like partnership, like knowing that we're all in an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were all under this assumption that we were these little silos of organizations out there in the wild doing our thing for a long time. And, one thing that pandemic, makes really clear is that we're all connected in really deep ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I really applaud leaders who embrace that and say, well, what are you the best in the world at? And how does that pair with what we're the best in the world at? And how do we really create innovation and challenge our own processes by bringing what you've learned in-house or doing some sort of joint venture partnership, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Enable others to act.
Yeah.
All right. Enable others to act. So the commitments on this one are foster collaboration by building trust and facilitating relationships, and then strengthen others by increasing self-determination and developing competence. So just a little bit of my own story. So, we're purpose and performance group. So purpose is kind of a big thing to us, obviously. And, we all kind of go through these exercises of our personal purpose. And so when I first started, I don't know if I've actually really told you this exactly, but when I first started working for PPG, I just wanted to, renew my purpose and kind of figure out, okay, in this new context, with all the things that I've learned over the last couple of years, like, what's my new purpose? And I'd spent a lot of time just kind of thinking through it. And I was walking through the office, and there's these posters in our office that are these 5 things. They're up on the wall, and like enable others to act was there. And it's like, oh, like that's it. Like I want to enable others to act. And it's this increasing self-determination and developing competence. Like that's what really spoke to me about it. And so for the last couple of years, like that's been my purpose, like off of that poster that's in our office. And so, this one is meaningful to me. But what's interesting about it is like now I use a different way that I talk about it because I dug down a little bit more into like, yes, enable others to act, but here's like a way that I can do that effectively. And so, I'll read through these behaviors and then kind of I'll reflect a little bit on that. But so the behaviors are develops cooperative relationships, actively listens to diverse points of view, treats people with dignity and respect, supports the decisions of others, gives people choice about how to do their work, and ensures that people grow in their jobs. And so the two that stood out to me were treat people with dignity and respect and ensure that people grow in their jobs. And the reason that I kind of paired them was because like I don't think that you can enable somebody to act unless you like believe in their value and you believe that they can grow and change and that you believe that they have dignity. Like why would I make that investment in somebody if I didn't believe that? And so I kind of see that as a foundational thing, like especially now when, people are just going through things that are challenging their self-perception of their dignity and their worth, like all of those things. And so the more leaders like build that back up through their actions, I think the better, the more important it is. And then this ensure that people grow in their own jobs is just kind of an outgrowth of that, like in this changing environment when, processes are changing, we don't know what's coming next week. Like it's more important than ever to make sure that you're not just sticking people in something that they've always done and equipping them and helping them adapt and grow and change to this environment that's changing. And I don't know, if we believe in their dignity, then I think we probably should do that. Yeah. So those are the two that stand out to me. None of that is easy by any means. Like I don't want people to hear like I'm saying that it's easy, but I think that it's super important right now.
Yeah. I mean, one, thank you for sharing that story. I hadn't heard that, and that's very cool. And you know what it highlights for me, especially you talking about this idea of we can't truly enable others to act if we don't believe in their innate worth as a human being and respect them and their dignity. I do think that there are, especially in some sectors, right, in some markets, there are organizations that struggle with that. I think anywhere that you have high turnover, anywhere where there's kind of that, where there's a low wage frontline, you know, and to be honest, even if you're high enough up in the organization, you might even view like a supervisor or a manager through this light almost as disposable. You know, we joke about the term human resources a lot, and because it is like kind of derogatory and not very respectful of people's innate value. And whatever, it's just a word. I think it exists, and it's going to be a long time before it changes. But, you know, we see people who struggle with this, and they're like, I need warm bodies. And then, you know, at some point I might have to upscale, downscale, you know, all of these things. And people start to dehumanize. And we see this in service organizations too, especially where people deal with challenging people day in and day out. You see it in law enforcement, healthcare, retail, where they even start to view their customers, the people that they're interfacing with in the public, as kind of like not valuable. And man, how do you enable people to grow and act if you don't respect them? And so what should I do now? I'm getting to a point here in my reflections is like, man, do some soul searching. Like that person, and I would challenge you, like, who is the least humanized in your mind on your team? Who have you written off? I would encourage you to do some exercise around that. Like, think about it. Don't put it in the closet of your mind. Think through, who is that person? How do I feel towards them? Why is that? Have they earned it? Maybe they have. Have they not? Is it based on your experience, your priorities? And if you want to take it a step further, I would say, ask yourself this question next, after you just reflect on that a little bit. How would I enable that person to be successful? How would I enable them to grow in their job, to become more skilled, to have a more meaningful work experience? Like, how would I enable that person? Or, I mean, just to perform better. What would that look like?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about just a recent conversation I had with somebody who, you know, they had somebody on their team who like wasn't performing that well. But this leader did respect them as a person and their dignity. And so did the work of figuring out, okay, there's got to be something. There's a different role. There's an assumption that they're making that needs to be challenged, whatever it is, and found a solution. And like that person is performing at a high level now and is happier, like all of those things that are like the ideal outcome of this. So.
It's amazing how that works.
You know, give it a little time and a little dignity, and you can figure something out.
And I mean, I just want to anchor back to why we're having this conversation. Like, what should I do now as a leader? Like, we're writing our leadership stories, like in real time. And when we talk about hard things like, man, I dehumanize some folks on my team. Like that, the ability to rise to that and face that challenge and that work of reflection around that, like that's the thing that writes a story that generations from now matters. That your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, a piece of that story is going to filter down to them. And we're all making those decisions every day on what legacy we want to leave behind. And so again, can everyone do this right now and like do the emotional work, dig in? Maybe not, but like we're getting to some good stuff here. All right. So for me, mine is more pragmatic than yours and a little less deep and, life-changing. But the behavior on enable others to act that stood out to me was gives people choice about how to do their work. And so I feel like you spoke truly as Ben with his concern for others. I'm going to speak for me as like someone who just like wants to get stuff done a lot and like, all right, how do we aggressively move forward? I all the time am kind of struggling with how much does the work people do need to align with my vision for the work that people do. And I believe what's written here. I believe that I should give people choice about how to do their work. And I know the way to do that is to inspire a shared vision that's very clear so that everyone's going the same direction, but people can go about it in their own ways. So I know that. I believe that. And I also have some personality things, right, that make it hard for me to always live up to that standard. And so, I find myself really kind of twisted up sometimes about what level of direction should I give to what detail. And I'll just say practically a helpful thing to people who might experience that's been helpful to me is just to say it. Like there's nothing wrong with saying to your team or to someone that you're meeting with in a one-on-one or whatever, like, hey, I believe that if we're clear enough about the outcome that you can get us to a great solution. I also struggle because in my mind, the way to get there is really clear. So please give me feedback on, do you need more clarity? Would you like to hear that? And also if I start being a little bit too micromanagey, I really need you to give me that feedback. And you probably have to say that a few times with someone before they'll actually believe you and give you feedback that you're okay with it. But that's been helpful for me is like the things that I'm struggling with internally, like just to say it, let people into that because it humanizes me, right? Vulnerability is a tool as a leader. Also like they're not questioning why am I doing that because I don't trust them? No, I don't think. Yeah. I think it's usually because I'm passionate about it and I have a vision and it doesn't really matter who's doing it. Like the most skilled person in the world could be doing it. And I would probably still have a part of me that feels compelled to say, well, what if we made it this font? What if we used this phrase there? Like, so it's helpful just to say it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also like that technique, doing that also really gives people permission to ask for clarity because I wonder how often when you're kind of in that spot of being like I have this idea of this font or whatever, and that person may be kind of like I don't really know, like I need some more clarity on this, but I feel like I'm supposed to just know how to do this, and so just having that conversation, and if they're like, no, I'm good, then you can be okay, I'm good, like just having that conversation has value.
Yeah. All right. We ready for the last one?
Last one. Yep.
Okay. The last of the 5 leadership practices is encourage the heart. And when we say encourage the heart, what we mean is that leaders recognize contributions by showing appreciation for individual excellence. So this is really individualized encouragement. And leaders who encourage the heart praise people for jobs well done. And so Kouzes and Posner outline 6 behaviors for this. The first one is they consistently issue praise and recognition. I think the key word there is consistently. Number 2, they creatively reward people for their contributions. Number 3, they express confidence in people's abilities. Number 4, they recognize people for commitment to shared values. So it's not just for what you do. It's also for just that we believe the same things. We want to give recognition for that. Number 5, they find ways to celebrate accomplishments. And number 6, they give team members appreciation and support. So, yeah, as you think through this last leadership practice, what stands out to you?
Yep. in this context of what should I do now, find ways to celebrate accomplishments is the one that really stood out. And I just kind of been thinking back to an experience Bob and I had a couple months ago in a workshop of we just made this kind of shift where like, this is just going to be all about celebration. Like, we're not going to ask the, like, what's not going well question. We're just going to say what's going well and how do we keep doing that? And, we spent, an hour or whatever, people just writing down and talking about these stories of things that were going well. And it was really valuable because we're in this environment where we've just kind of all decided it's all bad, and like sometimes it's just bad.
Yeah.
But like we're wiring our brains to just see the bad. And so by taking that hour, I think we rewired our brains a little bit to look at what was good and at the things that had been accomplished and the things that could be celebrated and that you could take joy in.
Yeah.
And, hopefully you walk out of that room looking for those things some more. And instead of trying to fix all the things that are bad, which you're going to have to do, but instead of just doing that, you're also keeping the good things going. So this is the one that stands out to me, and especially in our current context of just celebrate the good things, because otherwise we just stop thinking about them.
Yeah. Yeah. The one that stood out for me is we're working with a client who's going to be doing a couple days of a retreat. And their plan is to kind of end with a banquet and do some awards and call out specific individuals. And we had a really interesting conversation because, what surfaced was this idea of, well, shouldn't we kind of like start with that? The place people are coming from to experience this retreat, like we need to start with just some good and some gratitude. Yeah. And so they're still going to do a banquet at the end and still do awards. So instead of moving it or doing instead of we're going to do this other thing, they're going to do that and going to kick it off with just some like, hey, thank you everybody for showing up. Right? We recognize that just showing up might have been incredibly difficult with childcare and with schools shutting down and with whatever else is going on, right? We recognize that it could be really hard just to be here. And so thank you for doing that. Another example that came to mind is like feeding people. And especially, when we look at kind of entry-level positions with clients that we work with, food has been, I think, such a meaningful communicator of support over these last couple years. To be able to say, thank you for coming. Your lunch is taken care of. It's in the employee dining room or in the break room or whatever. Cost the organization relatively little, but when delivered with this narrative of you cared enough to show up, I care enough to support you, right? You care enough to come and interact with our customers and interact with our guests and interact with team members. And so I'm just going to call that out and say, whatever our value is that corresponds to, like, thank you for demonstrating that. And here's some kind of support. Yeah. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Yeah, part of what I like about that is that it forces you to flip the roles a little bit, and this is stereotypical, but there's kind of this idea of like, well, I'm providing you a job, you should be thankful, but instead just acknowledging this idea. I think that it's Chris that says this a lot, that like you're basically donating the difference between your work and the profit. Yeah. And like, so to acknowledge that, it seems really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, we are moving to this place where the employee has more power. And that's just a practical, kind of unsexy way to say it. Like, they have more power, they have more pull. I think the way you're saying it is better. Like, we should be grateful for them choosing us. Even if we are doing everything right and paying them, they still get to choose us.
Yep.
And we should be grateful that they do that, not take it for granted. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. I will say recognition wise, there's a lot of science out there. The more we recognize people, the more they're going to be on our team.
Yep.
It works. People care about being recognized for their contributions.
Yep.
They care whenever you recognize that something in their heart causes them to contribute their labor to the organization. And, if you've only done recognition with like giving someone a gift card or, a little spot bonus or even a real bonus, like a non-transactional recognition is really meaningful. So don't think of this as just, I'm going to transact you some more. Yeah, we transact every 2 weeks when you get your paycheck.
Right.
And so I'm going to transact a little bit more with you. No, we're really talking about encouraging the heart. Like there's a reason it's called encouraging the heart. It's not encouraging their bank account.
Right.
So yeah, encourage the heart, enable others to act, challenge the process, model the way, inspire a shared vision. Final takeaways.
Wow. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
We talked through a lot of things. I think when I kind of put these all together, it always kind of comes back to me about like that they all work together.
Yeah.
And so it's not that there's no value in doing any of these as an individual thing, but when you put them all together, that's when it's powerful. But that's like not necessarily encouraging to me because I see some of these that I'm good at and some that I'm not. And so, yeah, do the reflection and do the work to be good at the other ones also.
Yeah.
And I don't know, kind of like we started off with, like, what should I do now? Like, do these things, it's going to help your team. It's going to help your organization if you're doing these things.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy, but.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to where we started for my kind of takeaway, which is like, this is work. And like, this is we call it 1% work. So reflection is 1% work because 1% of leaders do it and do it effectively and do it well. So, I hope you've heard the call a little bit on this episode to do some reflection. I'll just say, we're using this field guide, and if you're on YouTube, you can see it. You've probably seen us flipping through it and marking things up as we go here. But I mean, this is like the exact same thing that we would do in a workshop with a team. And so if anyone wants to email us, info@purposeandperformancegroup.com, like email us. I'll send you the PDF of the field guide that we worked through today, and you can use it as your own reflection piece. Of course, also the book, The Leadership Challenge, you can get it wherever books are sold. It's awesome if you really want to dig into this. And then I would just also say, we would love to work with your team through this. It would have a very similar conversation to what we had today. Where are my strengths? Where are areas I can grow? Where am I winning with my team and my development? Where am I maybe have some blind spots around this? We might give each other feedback about, Ben, here's what I see as strengths of yours. And Luke, here's where I think, your strengths are. So lots of good stuff. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Magic in the Room.
Thanks.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love available on Apple Music, and this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.